Okay, good afternoon, teachers, and welcome to our stream for a while. Okay, Teacher Pao, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
clear.
yan. Magandang hapon, no? Hintayin natin si Sir Jambi kasi ano lang ng audio na, no? Pero good afternoon sa Teacher Pao and welcome to our session for today. And
Yes,
we have a very, very interesting, very like this is like a foundational knowledge, teacher Pao, no? Something that all our teachers, no, right in this
Hello?
pandemic, in this pandemic school year, should actually engage into and know about because this is where we are right now, digital education.
yes,
How about
yes.
teacher Pao? What do you think about this one?
Actually, it's for me, no. Yun nga, sabi mo, back to basics, no? Back to basics and knowing what digital education really means. No, I think it would be very
Yes.
helpful. Ano ba talaga yung ibig sabihin ng digital education?
Yes,
Yun.
okay, correct. Now, especially right now that we've gone through into the pandemic, sort of like we were put into a rush, right? We were forced to adapt to it, but most of us were actually just carried into the pandemic school year, not really knowing how to integrate technology, how technology actually work, what is this digital space, and what is this in general, the digital education. That's why revisiting the idea of digital education will actually be very, very important to our teams. Let's check our Sir Jambi's audio right now. Sir Jambi?
Meron ba? May feedback
Wala.
ba ako?
Okay, good. Yes, good. We're
I
good, Sir
didn't use
Jambi.
anything.
It's actually going to be important because Sir Jambi will be doing very important role later on. Okay. Anyway, teachers, before we start our session for today, please do um, invite your co-teachers, your teachers in your school by sharing the link into your Facebook timeline or in other social media platforms, okay? In order to invite others, no? So that we can have more educators, okay? Into our session for today, okay? So
Alam mo
teachers,
actually,
yes,
Sir Franco, ako if I were ano, our mga kaagapay, I'd invite everyone. Di lang teachers, di lang students, parents, if they know of anyone na involved sa policy making kasi parang sa situation natin ngayon everyone is concerned with
yes,
the
correct.
digital
Okay.
education that we are ano
And again,
experiencing.
that correct. Maraming salamat, Sir Jam. And again, very important that we have the correct understanding of what is digital education. Because if we really don't know the foundation or the actual meaning of it and how to go about it, then we're actually just maybe doing or trying to use technology, but not in a meaningful way. As we mentioned last time, kaya from the session of STEP, when we want to engage our students, our activities must be meaningful and therefore must really have should have a better understanding of what digital education is. Okay, so Sir Jambi's teacher Pau, maybe we can do a very very quick shout out for my audience and to greet them a good afternoon. Let me begin with of course we'll start from the from the from top, no, right
Yeah,
here. Yes,
11:25
I was
PM.
yes 11:25 3. So we have good afternoon to Teacher Mercy Nano. Ay, sorry, Teacher Orlando Hoven, Teacher M.A. Abigan, Teacher Regina Grace Asis, Teacher Gura Jomar, and Teacher Rasmia Dato Saronao. That's from like 4 hours ago. Okay, so waiting, like patiently
What?
waiting. And of
Really?
course, yes, Teacher Mercy Nano, Teacher Rosebelia Malo, Teacher Joseph Odelon Hermetano, always with us. Teacher
Yes.
Miriam Manalundong, and Teacher Tess Kiteves.
We also would like to greet Miss Jocelyn Gaspar, Miss Maui Sakdalan from Bulacan, Sir Arvin Pagsibigan. Good afternoon din po, Sir Roger Pagupat. Ay, si Miss Rosmalyn El Rosel, may request yan sa akin. Pagbibigyan ko yan tonight. Ayan.
Yay!
Si Tristan Tumbaga from Parañaque. And of course, si Pastor Manny from Imus, Cavite.
Yes, si Teacher Mako nandyan din, Miss Mabel Margalio, Miss Angela Jacinto, Teacher Manolita White from Cebu as always, Teacher Lourdes Santa Juana. Yes, and then Miss Jeneline Potestas and Sir Joe Cantero. Yan. Ang
Okay, and of
dami.
course, we
Uy!
also have Teacher Jocelyn Gaspar, Teacher Gemma Binileda, Teacher Jill, good afternoon, Teacher Lord Lena, Teacher Hitesh Kumar Sharma, I think this is from India. And of course, we also have Teacher Alex Javier Alvarez, Teacher Minerva Amores, and of course, good afternoon to Miss Carmi Rivera.
Ayan, of course, another avid viewer of our webinars, Miss Angelina Carpio Reyes. Good afternoon po. Miss Ginaline Villar, Miss Ivy Merel M. de la Cruz, Miss Maricor Banez, ayan si Sir, binanggit na kanina ni Sir Franco, Miss Mabel Margalio, Sir Renato Garces, and Miss Jocelyn Guhiling watching all the way from Davao.
Sir Franco, yung Teacher Jill na binanggit mo kanina from Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh
From
City.
Vietnam. Wow.
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 So we have like viewers from all over Southeast Asia right now and South Asia. Go ahead, Teacher Pau.
Yes, si Ma'am Jane Ramientos, Ma'am Aida Ramirez Martinez, Ma'am Catherine Bernaldez, Sir Jeremy, okay, umakyat bigla, nawala. Sir Jeremy J. Alava, Miss Delia Abayon from Tanza Cavite, no, na naging busy because of church ministry. Okay na okay lang po yan. Okay, and then Sir Lord Lena and Miss Maria Ana Peso Malinog. I think she's always watching us. Yan.
Yes. Okay. So we'll greet the rest later, no? So we could start our session for today. Okay. So again, teachers, this will be a very very important session for all of us into understanding the digital education. So Sir Jambi, let's now proceed with the introduction of our speaker for today.
Sure, of course, as always, my pleasure. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, our most esteemed guest for this afternoon is an award winning, multi degreed educator who has been in the educational field since 2002. She is the founder CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting, LLC, and the regional director of North Louisiana for the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana. She consults with members of several schools and businesses and presents at conferences globally. She is lifetime certified in Louisiana in secondary English education as a reading specialist, as a school librarian, as an educational technology facilitator, as an educational technology leader, and in Educational Leadership 1. She is certified in Texas as a principal in English language arts and reading for grades 4 to 8 and grades 8 to 12, as a reading specialist for early childhood to grade 12, and as a school librarian. She holds multiple technology certifications, including but not limited to IC3 certification, Google Certified Trainer and Innovator, Apple Teacher, and a Microsoft Innovative Educator Trainer and Expert. She holds a bachelor, a master's plus 30, and an education specialist degree in curriculum and instruction from Louisiana State University, a master of library science from Texas Women's University, and a master of educational leadership with a concentration in educational technology leadership from Nichols State University. She also holds a doctorate in education with a concentration in educational leadership from Lamar University. She is a 2014 Leader of the Year for Region 2, Louisiana Association of Computer Using Educators. 2015 Campus Teacher of the Year in the Zachary Community School District. 2015 Librarian of the Year for Louisiana Librarian Association. 2016 Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana Member of the Year. 2017 PBS Learning Media Digital Innovator for Louisiana. 2017, Center for Digital Education, Top 30 Technologists, Transformers, and Trailblazers. A 2017 Young Professional Initiative, 40 Under 40 Awards honoree. A 2019 Shreveport National Pan-Hellenic Council Mover and Shaker. 2019 Customer Commitment Award honoree from Better Business Bureau's Torch Awards for Ethics. 2020 Future of Education Technology Conference featured presenter. 2020 International Society for Technology in Education featured voice. And 2021 Texas Computer Education Association featured thought leader. Ladies and gentlemen, mga kaagapay, Dr. Desiree Alexander.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dr. Desiree. I'd say good afternoon, but could you share with us what exactly is the time there from wherever you are?
It is 1:16 a.m.
AM.
Wow.
Wow, such dedication, such sacrifice. We thank you in advance for doing this. Thank you very much.
Of course, I love being here. And that was an amazing introduction. I was like, oh no. Thank you for
How
that.
were you able to do all of those? Those the introduction per se, I think our audience right now are already wowed.
Oh,
What more with what you can share? So thank you for gracing us today, Miss Desiree.
no, thank you guys for having me. Seriously, I'm happy to be here.
Sir Franco, you're on mute. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Desiree, again for being with us and here at Kaagape. So we welcome you. And our teachers now right now in the audience are already sending you their warmest regards and greetings and for being with us here in the community. And thank you again for accommodating us. As mentioned by Sir Jambian, as you mentioned, it's already morning in your on your end, but you're still here with us this morning. But maybe, Dr. Desiree, before we begin with your session, so that we can fully maximize the session for today is that maybe could just give us like an overview on what's going to transpire for your session and what do we expect to get from the session and the discussion on digital education.
So hopefully what we're going to kind of look at is what is digital education? Why is it important in 2021? No matter what content you're teaching, no matter what grade level you're teaching, why is digital education part of the future? And I say part of the future because it doesn't have to completely overtake what we're doing right now, but it has to be introduced and it has to be part of what we're going to be doing for the future. It's the only way that we can really set up our students to be successful in their future. So we're going to talk about what is it, what are some of the things we need to consider when we're looking at digital education. And then we're going to get very, very practical and hands-on and look at what can I do as the teacher in the classroom to not only help myself teach in a digital space, but also help my students learn in a digital space.
Thank you. That's well something that our teachers will definitely be looking forward to in this session, Dr. Desiree. So again, teachers, Dr. Desiree will give you the floor now for your session. Okay, we'll just wait for the presentation to be shared right now. But while Dr. Desiree is presenting sharing her screen, teachers, please be reminded that we'll be in the chat. Okay, Teacher Pau, Sir Jambi, and I will be at the chat. Okay, please do engage us if you have questions, insights. I believe that Dr. Desiree as well plays her Twitter account. Okay, so please do send all your learnings, insights okay, via Twitter. That's at learning at educator Alex okay, at twitter.com. So please do indulge Dr. Desiree on all the things that you'd like to talk about this session. Okay, and of course, okay, don't forget to take note that the certificates will be the evaluation link will be given at the end of the session. So, Dr. Desiree, good luck and on your session, teachers. Enjoy our session for today.
Okay, well, seriously, good afternoon. Hopefully, you've been already having a good day, and hopefully, I can make your day better or bring some type of information to your day. I do have the YouTube channel pulled up on a second device. So if you see me kind of looking to the side, I'm looking at your comments and anything that's coming in. But what I want you to do is, if we have any questions, any discussion, any experiences, definitely bring those up when we have our discussion time. Because when I teach, I like to say, it's not about me, it's about you. So I want to make sure that if I say something, you're like, oh yeah, I was successful with that, share your story. Or if you're like, oh, I tried that, it just didn't work for me, share your story. We learn from each other as much as you learn from the person on the stage. So we're going to be talking today about digital education, what it actually means for students and teachers, how it can help us grow in education, and how that's going to affect our educational journey. So welcome, hello. I am Dr. Desiree Alexander. I'm not going to introduce myself because that was an amazing introduction. If you'd have gotten it from me, you'd have gotten like 2 sentences, and that would have been it. So that was an amazing introduction. So I'm not even going to go into who I am. That was already said. I will say that I started my career as a 6th grade and 8th grade. So that's more like middle school, junior high English teacher. And then I became a high school English teacher, a middle school librarian, a high school librarian, and then a district level instructional technology supervisor. So those are my lenses that, I look to education through. I have taught in many different types of schools, from very, very, very low income poverty schools to more, middle class schools. I've taught students who are very, very remedial, and I've taught students who were magnet. So it's just, and everything in between. So I do have different outlooks and experiences on education in general as well. So this is all the ways that you can contact me. Honestly, if you can get to my website, which is educatoralexander.com, if you can get to my website, you can get to me. So everything that you need about me is on the website. Plus, of course, a million different resources, and we do free webinars almost every weekend, all that kind of stuff. So please, you are welcome to go and find me, and I would love to communicate with you, because we're all learning on this educational journey. Okay, so the big thing, what I tell my teachers, because I know sometimes digital education can be really scary, right? Either I personally as a teacher don't have the skills, or don't feel like I have the skills to introduce digital education, or I am worried about my students who may not have the devices, or may not have the Wi-Fi or the bandwidth to do certain things, even at school. I've taught at schools where the Wi-Fi was so shaky, we didn't know if we would have it from one day to the next. That kind of thing. What I tell my teachers is, if you are open to change, that's really all it takes. If you're open to saying, hey, how can we introduce this? I know it may be a struggle, but I want to do better, and I want to introduce this. As long as you are open to the paradigm shift, that is all it takes to at least get started. And I know all of us, in the audience, are at different levels. I know some of you are fully virtual, some of you are fully not. So I know we have, varying levels and things like that. But really, it's all about being open to the struggle, right? Being open to the change. And I love this quote. And I am not a presenter that sits and reads the screen to you, but I am about to read the screen to you because I absolutely love this quote. Just thinking about how to rethink education. So I'm going to read to you, and I apologize in advance. As a traditional teacher, I stood in front of the classroom, the vessel of all knowledge, and I poured that knowledge into my 25 little sponges at the rate and level I decide. As a blended learning teacher, so when she's introducing that technology, I explain our common core goal and throw my 25 little sponges into the pool. Some happily swim independently to the other side and even move on to the next pool. Some need some water wings and my support to get there. And some students work collaboratively to build a raft and work as a team to get to the other side. And some get clear out of the pool and go their own way. My job now is to design the learning environment so that students acquire and apply their own knowledge through Blackboard, online resources, and paper resources independently or collaboratively to make state standards. In other words, the students do the work. And that is where we want to go. When we're thinking about blended learning, when we're thinking about distance learning, any kind of introduction of technology and digital learning into the classroom, we are thinking about it as a paradigm shift. It's going to shift from it being the teacher show to it being the student show. So let's look at some of the ways that the paradigm is going to start shifting. And that's not comfortable for all educators, right? That's not easy for all educators. So it really is going to bring some of us to an uncomfortable place because we're so used to doing it the same way. But when we do this, when we start having that paradigm shift of it being the students are actually doing the work, the students are actually struggling with the content, where we're taking the spotlight off of us and putting it on them, that's when true learning happens. So, and that's what we want to get to. So let's look at some of the ways that this paradigm shift is going to happen. So, of course, you can't talk about digital education without talking about access, right? You just can't. You can try, but if I'm a classroom teacher, if I'm the boots on the ground, as they say, and you say, hey, we're going to do digital education, but we don't have any devices, we don't have any bandwidth, but we're still going to do it. Well, how are we going to do it, right? So when we're talking about introducing digital education into our curriculum, we have to address access. What access do we have? That the answer to access is going to allow us to know how far can we get in digital education. Not where we need to start, but how far can we get right now. So for example, if we know that we have very, very low bandwidth, if we know that we may not have all of the devices that we would like to have, then that's going to mean that we're going to have to think a little bit differently. Instead of just going to a whole distance learning model, that's going to mean that we are going to have to do some more blended type of things where we're still doing a lot of things on paper and we're introducing technology, maybe in little chunks into our lesson. We still want to introduce that technology though. We still need to introduce that technology, but it may look a little bit different. So when you're talking about distance learning, blended learning, any kind of digital space, one size is not going to fit all. And that's just period, right? So even for a presenter, sometimes it's scary to talk about, the digital space because that someone's going to be sitting there with 25,000 computers, beautiful Wi-Fi, let's go, where you're going to have another teacher that's sitting there that doesn't have that access. So it's a little scary to, bring up the topic, but the thing is the topic needs to be brought up because no matter what situation we're in, the future is in technology. So we have to start introducing digital education into our classrooms. So when we're looking at addressing access, sometimes that is completely out of our control. But when we're looking at introducing digital technology, depending on what our access is, there are always little shortcuts and little tips and tricks, and we'll be talking about some of those today that you can do to help if you do have low access. Teaching digital citizenship and safety. So that is huge, right? If we're introducing digital technology into our classrooms, we also have to keep our students and our families safe. We also need to teach them how to act on that technology. I think one of the worst things that we do to our kiddos or for our kiddos is that we assume a lot. So, I'll have teachers, I'll talk about digital citizenship. I'm like, well, we need to teach them how to be good digital citizens. We need to teach them how to act online. We need to teach them the consequences of, doing negative things online. And I'll have teachers that'll say, oh, well, we don't need to teach that. They're on so many social medias. They know how to do all that kind of stuff. We don't need to bring that up. The thing is, nobody is born knowing this stuff, right? Nobody is born knowing how to behave online. Nobody is born with digital citizenship. So we educators have to be the ones to bring up digital citizenship and teach our students about those consequences and teach them how to be safe online. There are many, many adults walking around that don't know how to be safe online. So we have to be the ones to take that charge and teach our students how to be safe. And then, of course, ensuring privacy and security with all the tech tools and things like that we use. We want to make sure that all of our information is private and secure. Personalizing learning for students. So this is the biggie. This is why we do it, right? This is what makes us excited to bring digital education into our classrooms, because we can actually empower the individual learner. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the more practical, hands-on, like what can I actually do as a teacher to start doing this in my classroom. But isn't that what we're all trying to get to, is to empower each and every student to meet them where they are in their education and bring them beyond. Like, isn't that what we want? So when we start bringing digital education into it, that's exactly what we can start doing, because the computer, the iPad, whatever you're using in the classroom is never going to replace the teacher, but it is an aid. It is something that we can use to help. So I can't wait to get to that part to talk about, the ways that we can empower our individual learners. And of course, and I think you had Stephanie here with the last webinar talking about student engagement, which is everything, student relationships and student engagement. But using that technology can foster student engagement. Some of our children, I swear, they're born swiping, right? I don't know how they learn this so quickly, but they're like born doing that now, because technology is part of us. So fostering that student engagement, our students learn differently from how we learned, and it's just a fact. So we're going to have to meet them where they are. And that's how we're going to, one of the ways that we're going to start keeping them engaged. But here's the thing. Just because you put a device in front of a student doesn't mean that's an automatic engagement. So we still have a job to do, even if we're using technology and digital education, to keep them engaged. And we're going to talk about that. Developing agency and self-directed digital learning. We want our students to start taking their learning and making it their own. We want them to start having student agency, and we want them to start using their student voice. The one thing that I tell my educators when I hear, we're going to give students a voice. You're not giving students a voice. Students already have a voice, right? But you're amplifying their voice. You're giving them a safe and a brave space to use their voice, but you're not giving them anything. Like, let's control ourselves, right? But we are allowing them to use their voice. And we want to start doing that because we want to start building thinkers, not just people who can follow directions, right? We want to start building those people who make the directions. So developing that agency and that self-direction is everything, and optimizing of assessment. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. Of we have to start rethinking the way we assess students, and digital education is the perfect time to really start thinking about how are we assessing them. Not to get too much into the practical, but one of the things I heard a lot during the pandemic, and a lot of teachers had to start using digital education and digital tools, was, well, my students are going to cheat. They can just look up the answers. They can just, I'm concerned about that. And what I had to start answering was, well, we need to rethink our assessment. If it's that easy to cheat on all of your assessments, that means all of your assessments are not authentic. So that means you're going to have to rethink the way that we're assessing students. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. 3 out of 4, collaborate with parents and families to support. Now, of course, this is easier said than done. Again, I have been in the classroom for about, like in the education system for about 17 years. Now it's 19 years. But so I know this is easier said than done sometimes, but we have to communicate with our parents and our families and make sure that they not only know what we're doing, especially when it comes to digital education, but that they understand what we're doing. They understand why we're doing it. They understand how they can help in the process. Now, will you have 100% buy-in with everyone saying, yes, you're awesome, I would love to help? No. Okay, of course when are we ever going to have that type of, never. You're never going to get 100% buy-in from any group. But we do need to make sure that we are communicating with them. Even if we may not get the feedback that we want, don't let that stop you from making sure that our parents and our families and our guardians are communicated with. Setting expectations and support for student participation, and supporting the SEL, the social and emotional learning and needs of students. We're going to talk about that when we get to the practical side as well, because especially when you start going to completely virtual, especially when you start going to, I don't have that eye contact with my student anymore, for my teachers who are in that type of situation, I would say it's even more crucial to have those SEL check-ins. But even if I see my student every day, it doesn't mean I'm connecting with my student every day. So we're going to talk about those little things that you can start doing to not only start building those healthy student relationships, but also checking in with the SEL with our students. And last but not least, teacher professional development and well-being. The quote about the paradigm shift, when she says, she takes the little sponges and she throws them into the pool. I don't know about you, but I felt that is what happened during the pandemic. There's so many teachers that were just kind of thrown into the pool, and it was like, hey, swim, and you're like, okay. And it was panic inducing, right? It was a little crazy. So now we're kind of taking a step back. So we're kind of stopping and going, okay, breathe, right? You either survived or thrived or both. Now, what can we do to make it better, right? We see where the holes are. We see where the successes are. What can we do to make it better? And one of those things is making sure that our teachers are supported, making sure that they have the skills that they need, making sure that they feel comfortable doing what we're asking them to do. And part of that is making sure that they are getting the correct professional development and making sure that they are actually taking care of themselves. That is something that we assume that people know how to do, is take care of themselves. But we learned pretty quickly that is not the case, okay? That not everyone walking around knows how to practice self-care and take care of themselves. And it's not because I don't want to do it, it's because I don't see how to do it. With time, with all of the stressors that I have, when am I supposed to do that? So teaching teachers to take care of themselves and to get the skills that they need is a part of this too. So this is when I would usually kind of stop and do discussion, but I know we want to kind of keep the discussion for the back end. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So looking at the practical side of this, what can I do? How can I get started with introducing digital education into my classroom? And what are the conditions that I can set up for this to be successful? And when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about them in all spaces. So whether this is a blended learning situation, whether it's a distance learning situation, whether, whatever it's going to be for your digital education journey, that's what we want to discuss. So one of the things that I saw that we did completely wrong when the pandemic hit, and it wasn't anybody's fault that we did it wrong. It really was, we did what we could to survive, especially at the beginning. And I don't know what your situation was, but in the United States, we pretty much got shut down overnight. So it was like, I can speak for even in Louisiana, Friday we were going to school, Monday we were not. So it was that, like, by the way, there's no more school. So it really was like everyone just went into survival mode. And one of the things I saw happening, and I was like, oh no, is everyone wanted tech tools. I just need some tech tools. I just need an LMS. I just need something to organize this information for my students. We had teachers and school districts, printing off packets and delivering them homes. And, just everything was just like, we just need to get them some information. We just need to get it done. And that's what we were. That's what we did to survive. But once we kind of started getting into it, we started realizing we didn't have a roadmap. We didn't have a plan. We didn't know where we were going. We just were doing stuff to like patch up holes. So when we finally could kind of breathe a little bit, around August or September when school started opening up again, even though a lot of us were in like the virtual spaces and all that, it still was, okay, we have to stop living in survival mode. We have to. So one of the things I started telling my teachers is to stop, and we have to know what we want to do before we know what we're going to do. So before you start worrying about tech tool, stop. What are we trying to accomplish? Okay. And I want you to take that to heart, because that's the first practical thing I want you to ask yourself is, what are you trying to accomplish? We don't have time to use technology just to use technology, right? We don't have time to use technology just for technology's sake. So we need to really focus on, what are we trying to accomplish by doing this? So that's my little saying, we got to look at what we want to do before we look at what we're going to do. Okay. So let's hop in. Let's go. So one of the conditions for optimal learning that I saw happen to a lot of my teachers, and I don't know if you're going to relate to this or not, but they started drowning in tech tools. There are a lot of tech tools out there, right? There's a lot of things that do the same thing, and they're just, somebody always has their favorite that they're going to tell you to use. And I started telling my teachers, don't drown in tech tools. Like, stop it. Okay. And I would say even my more techie teachers are worse at this, because they know a little bit more and they use a little bit more, and then they're using all 5,000 different. It's like, please stop it. So I said, we want to start using the WHO system. So this is just something I came up with to help my teachers stop drowning in tech tools. So the WHO system is what to use, how to use it, and the outcome of the usage. So when you're looking at what do you want to accomplish, what's your goal? So I may say, well, my goal is I want my students to create videos. And I don't care if I'm using blended or completely distance or whatever. I want my students to create a video. And this could be even when you have low bandwidth, like that's my goal. That's what I want to get to. So you're going to look at what to use. There's 5 million tech tools to create videos for free, right? You can use Flipgrid, you can use Screencastify, you can use Screencast-O-Matic, you can use Zoom, you can use Google Meet. There's a million and one, ways to create a video. So focus on one. What do I want to test out? What to use? Okay, I'm going to use Screencastify. Perfect. How easy is it to use? There are way too many tech tools for you to sit there and take a whole day, learning how to use one tool because it's that complicated to use. I like to tell my teachers, if you are a pro, if you consider yourself a tech pro, if it takes you more than 5 minutes, you need to move on. Okay, if you're a middler, if it takes you more than like 30 minutes to an hour, because you may want to watch a video for it and stuff like that, move on. If you're a newbie, it may take you a little bit longer, right? But move on. There's too many tech tools. So how easy is it to use? And then number 3 is when I get in trouble. Because when I'm coaching my teachers, I am very blunt. And, I'll ask them, well, what's the outcome you want to get from this? And they'll say, oh, I want my students to create a video. No, that's your goal. Your goal was you want your students to create a video. What is the outcome of the usage? Why do you want your students to create a video? Again, we don't have time to do technology just to do technology, right? That's just, what's the purpose of that? So what is the outcome you're trying to get? What are the skills you're trying to teach from this? Why can't they just write an essay, right? If you can't answer that question, then you need to rethink what you're doing with technology, with digital education. So what is the actual outcome that you want your students to get from this goal? And then they'll go, okay, well, you know what? I want them to be able to communicate on camera. I want them to be able to know how to create a video, because so many things are like, that's how people learn now. That's how people communicate now. I need them to have those skills. When we get to the curriculum and the content, I want them to be able to teach this math skill, because if they can teach this math skill, that means they honestly know how to do this math. Okay, well, that's the outcome, right? That's what you actually want to get from it. So when you use that who system, it's going to start cutting out some of those tech tools, and you can actually use something that makes sense, and that's going to have a permanent impact on your students' learning, because we just don't have time for the silliness. Now, the essential practice. So you notice that the one that we just went through was the conditions for optimal learning. So you're setting up those conditions. And with those come essential practices, actually things you can practically do. And one of those is, I want you to stop 2 things. So one of them is stop trying to use every tech tool that's in existence. I want you to have your nice little list of tech tools that you're going to use, and you're going to use them well until you can't use them anymore. So I want you to just create a short list. These are the 3 to 5 tech tools that we're going to use. This is our LMS, whether you're using Google Classroom is now kind of considered an LMS. So whether we're using Edmodo or Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or Schoology or Canva or whatever, Canvas or whatever. But what Canva, I always get those confused. But what LMS are we using? Okay, well that's that. Okay, well, what are we going to be using for videos? What are we going to be using for whatever? Make your short list and just stick to that. Because when you start introducing a new tech tool every couple of days, you're not only confusing your students, you're confusing your parents, and sometimes, let's be honest, you're confusing yourself. So we want to stop doing that. But I also want you to stop being so hard on yourself. This is new for so many of us. Just like I don't know how long everyone's been teaching, but if you can think back to like your first couple of years or your first year of teaching, you were probably not the rock star you are right now. Okay. You may be the same rock star, but you probably weren't the rock star that you are now. So I want you to stop being so hard on yourself, because when you do start introducing that distance, that digital learning and digital education, sometimes it's like starting teaching all over again. Okay, because the thing is, when we talk about introducing digital education, it is a different style of teaching. So it's not just putting a device in a student's hands and then doing the same thing I've always done. And we're going to talk about the 5-part lesson plan, which is honestly just a good 5-part lesson plan in general, but also how that's going to play out in the digital education space. So number 2, having clear expectations. This is crucial, especially when it comes to digital education. You have to be clear on why we're doing what we're doing and how we need to accomplish it, so you can be clear to your parents and you can be clear to your students. I know that sometimes we don't have the clear expectations from, whoever's making the decisions. Sometimes they don't have the clear expectations for people above them. But I like to say we can only start where we can, right? We can only control what we can control. So in my classroom, I'm going to make sure that I have clear expectations for everything. When you start thinking about blended learning and you start thinking about distance learning and just introducing technology in the classroom, that's a whole new set of procedures and rules for classroom management that need to be in place. Okay, it's not just, I'm just going to throw an iPad at you. So we do have to start thinking about, well, what are the classroom management things that we need to think about when we're talking about technology? How are you and we're going to talk about organization in a second, but how are you organizing the technology? How are students getting it? How do you know what device each student is using each time? How do the students get the devices? Do they just run up like the Hunger Games and just knock each other down to get it? Do they, all of that needs to be a procedure. All of that needs to be a classroom rule. It's going to save you so much heartache and time later if you can set those things up now. And having your students have clear expectations for how do they behave when they're online. That's when that digital citizenship is going to come into play. So that's something that you can start doing now. If you know, hey, we're going to start introducing more and more digital things, I need to come up with clear expectations, clear rules, clear procedures, so the students know exactly what's going on, and then I know exactly what's going on. Then I can hold them accountable if something happens. I always say, even when I was, a supervisor of others, I can't hold you accountable for something that I did not explicitly say. I live by that rule. And even if you're like, well, it's common sense that they should wear shoes. Like, that's common sense. Yeah, okay, great. But if I didn't explicitly tell you that, then I cannot hold you accountable. So I have to explicitly make sure that I am telling you my expectations, and then I can hold you accountable for them. Organize. So this is very easy for some and very hard for others. Like I usually, when I'm doing this in person, I'm like, raise your hand if you're my organized people, because you know if you're the type A organized person, or not, right? But organization, when it comes to using technology in the classroom, is a little bit different, and you have to be organized. So I tell my teachers, you have to be organized in 2 ways when you start talking about distance learning and digital education. So you have to be organized in 2 ways. You have to organize yourself virtually, and you have to organize yourself in person. So when we talk about virtually, if you're going to start using digital education and you're going to start using devices in your classroom and things like that, then you want to start thinking through what's going to be your organizational system, whether it be files on your computer and assessments that you're creating and things like that, whether it be, whether you're using Google or Microsoft, and, those are kind of the top 2. That's why I keep going to them. But, whatever you're using, you need to be organized with it. if you look at your, let's say, Google Drive right now, how organized is it? How quickly can you find information? Does it, if you, I always say, if you have to do an advanced search more than once a month, you're doing something wrong, right? Because it should be in folders, it should be organized, you should be able to find stuff. And with organization, and we can have like a whole 3 hours just on organization, but with organization, the sooner you do it, the better. So I'll have people that will go, with Desiree, I'm really busy. I'm like, I get it, believe me. And then like, when should I start? Now to yesterday is when you should start. Because the thing is if you think about organization, the longer you wait, the messier it's going to be, right? So if you say, well, I need to organize, and then it's suddenly it's 3 years later, then you have 3 years more content. So you have to start getting yourself organized. And I know it's easier said than done for people. I have, best friends who are not type A like me. So I see the struggle in them trying to get organized, but you do need to get organized virtually. And then you also need to organize yourself in person. So whether that be, we already talked about like the expectations of like how do they get the devices and how, doing all those kind of things. And the resource I'm going to give you later has some really awesome videos on it for creating systems for using technology. It's really, really awesome. But, when I started teaching completely virtually, so like distance learning, I also taught in a hybrid type of situation where, I saw my students on Sundays and not on Sundays and that kind of thing. Also taught in a blended learning where we introduced technology. We were in person all the time, but we had technology pockets is what we called it. But what I started realizing is I needed to organize myself in person, because when we talk about student engagement, one of the things I started realizing is if I wasn't on the screen, they would just immediately disengage. So if I say, oh, y'all, I left my book in the kitchen, hold on, and I went to get my book, by the time I got back, like somebody was playing Xbox, somebody was eating, somebody's watching TV, somebody went back to sleep. Like they just could kind of completely disengage. So I realized I needed to have all of my stuff right around me for whatever I needed to use. So I just got a box and I would just throw everything that I needed for the next day in the box. Even when I was at school, I made sure that everything that I needed for the next day was ready to go. And that way I didn't have to worry about, where is this, where is that, and just having downtime and having that time for the students to disengage. So organizing yourself, but I also flip that to organizing your students. So just like you're going to do this, we have to start teaching our students how to also organize themselves and organize themselves virtually too. So all the same, and you can share your struggle with them. Like, hey, y'all, I'm struggling with this too, but we're going to do it together, right? We're going to start organizing ourselves together. So we need to start helping our students learn these skills as well. Rigor. When we're talking about assessments, when we're talking about the things that we're actually doing with our students, I like to say, especially from, the time that we kind of got shut down, we were just in survival mode, that we have to put that rigor back into education. We have to start allowing our students to struggle with information. We have to start giving them time to struggle with the content. I don't know about you, but many, many people that I teach and mentor and coach, you learn when you struggle, right? Even when I'm teaching a Google tool or something like that, when I say, okay, well, you go and do it yourself, that's when you learn. You're like, wait, where's that button? What did she say? Okay, there it is. And that's when you actually start to learn, is when you start to struggle with it, when you can interact with it. We have to start giving our students that time to do that. And we have to start putting that rigor back into it. One of the things I found, I wasn't happy about finding it, but one of the things I found with my kiddos is the easier I would make it sometimes, the more they would fail it. And I was like, I gave you everything you needed. Like, I gave you all the answers to the test on the study guide. Why would you fail it? And I really started seeing a pattern. Like, when I would make something just super duper duper easy, they just didn't have any engagement with it. Like, they were like, all right. And they would fail it. And then when I would put something, I would give them a project that they had to struggle with. And, I gave them a little bit more free range and they needed to make stuff themselves. And, I would sit there and go, oh, they're not going to do this. They're going to, just hate me. They're going to hate the assignment. They would rise to the occasion. And they would actually learn from it, right? Not memorize it, not just regurgitate it. They would learn from it. So we have to start putting that rigor back, no matter how we're teaching and how we're introducing that digital education. We have to make sure that what we're doing is rigorous. And when we're talking about assessments, like I kind of said before, we have to start rethinking the way we assess, and we need to start assessing more often. So I know, like, a lot of us like to do like a Friday test or, something like that, where it's kind of a regulated assessment. That doesn't mean you have to stop doing that, but we can't wait till Friday to see if they understand the skill. We just can't. We're losing time. Because if you teach the skill on Monday and Tuesday, and then you're doing some, like, assignments and, little things with it. With the assessment, like actually assessing, do I understand this, is not till Friday. I just lost a whole week of instruction because I didn't understand to begin with, right? So we got to start assessing smaller and more often. And part of that is rethinking assessment. Not everything has to be a multiple choice test. Not everything has to be a 5-page essay. So we need to start rethinking, how can I do little snapshots of assessments so I can see, did my student actually understand this skill? And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the lesson plan. Videos are everything. They just are. I know teachers who are like, I hate videos, blah, blah, blah. Videos are everything. That's how our students learn. We are dealing with the TikTok generation, right? I still hear people saying YouTube generation. I'm like, no, sweetie, YouTube generation is gone. We are dealing with the TikTok generation. They want videos and they want it short and they want it to the point. So we need to, again, meet them where they are. Because when we're talking about videos, I do like a 5-minute video series. That's pretty popular with educators. And even that, I'm like, students are probably not going to watch a 5-minute video. And they may watch it to be compliant, but is that what are we looking for complacency? Like, is that what we're trying to create compliant people or thinkers or critical thinkers, right? So we need to rethink videos. We need to rethink the way we create videos, what we're finding in videos, and having our students create videos. Because videos are kind of the way of the future, we need to start teaching our students, some skills for creating their own videos too. I'm gonna move a little bit quicker through these. Cultural relevancy. The basis of cultural relevancy is connecting the curriculum, connecting what you're actually doing to your students' lives. And we've been talking about this for years in education, right? This is nothing new. It's not like a pop-up like, what? But we have to start connecting what we're doing to our students' lives. You can't do that unless you know your students. So that's where that, like, I don't care how you're teaching. I don't care if you have a lick of technology or you have 50,000 computers. I don't care. Student relationships are everything. Point blank, period. Okay? If you don't understand your students, if you don't know your students, if you don't know where they're coming from in their lives, how are you supposed to teach them? How are you supposed to connect with them? Right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And I teach a class on building healthy student relationships because that's where all of education comes from. I like to say we are teaching people, right? We can't say, oh, y'all, we need to recall the class of 2001. Let's go ahead and recall them back. We made a mistake. We can't do that, right? We don't have that option. So we have to build those student relationships. And that is what's going to lead to cultural relevancy. Because if I understand my students, if I understand what's important to my community, because all of our communities are different. I don't care if we're the same race, gender, all of our communities are different. So if I understand my community, I can take my content and connect it. That's what makes you a professional teacher, right? Let that sink in. That's why we need you, is to take that content and connect it to our students' lives. If they have to ask, why do I need to know this? Why is this important? And I think all of us have done that sometime in our life, right? Hopefully you're not doing it right now. But all of us have done it sometime in our life, right? Like, why am I here? Why am I learning this? Then we have not made those connections. I used to tell my students, you can always question me on why we're learning this. Always. Because if I can't answer it, I need to question myself as a teacher. And that's just, but now I would teach them there's a time and a place to do it. You're not going to raise your hand in the middle of my lesson and go, why are we learning it? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Okay. There's a time and a place. You can always question why, like, what is this about? Because if I haven't shown that to you, I haven't done part of my job. Okay. And there were a couple of times that students were like, what's this? Okay. And I was able to answer them, thank goodness. But still, so we have to start bringing our students' culture into that curriculum. And like we can spend a whole day just talking about equity and DEI and cultural relevancy. So I'm going to move on. Transitions. So transitions are helpful whether you're teaching, again, in person, whether you're doing distance learning, especially when you're talking about bringing in digital education. So if you're doing one thing for your whole class time, I'm just going to, no. Okay. Just please don't. So if you're doing one thing for the entire class, I don't care if you're teaching for 30 minutes or an hour or a 90-minute block. If you're doing one thing for the whole time, something is no. No, I don't mean like one day we're doing a project for the whole day. Then there may be something different. But just every single day, no. So you're going to need some good transitions. Now, when you're talking about distance learning, like I said, on the website that I'm going to give you, it has some really good videos on some ways that you can do some of those transitions. So I'm not going to get too deep into it, but if you are on like distance learning and you're on the computer, one of the things that I like to do for a transition, because we like to use timers for transitions, we like to use music for transitions. And I always say, if you're going to use music, please make sure it's a song that the students know, because if they don't know when it's going to end, that kind of defeats the purpose of the music. But we use music for transitions. Using the chat. So usually what I would do when I'm stopping for questions throughout is I would use the chat as a transition. So before, like you saw on the slide, just to kind of prove this point, the slide that said, let's go, that's usually a transition that I would use. So I would ask a question, we would do some communicating, right? And then I would say, if you're ready to move on, type let's go. If you're not, type wait. That small little direction not only have you checking in with the students, because you're checking in to see who's typing let's go, right? And you can even do this in person, right? Because I have people that, like, even if you don't want them to speak and get rowdy or what, you can do hand signals, you can do so you're checking in with the students to see if they're with you. You're giving them permission to tell you to wait. So you're giving them permission to say, nope, I'm sorry, I was disengaged, bring me back, right? You're giving them permission. I'm not going to cut your head off if you say, yeah, I don't know what we're doing. I'm sorry. Bring me back. So you're giving them permission to say, wait, I'm sorry, bring me back. Also, you're getting the attention of the people that did disengage. So whether that be online, if I look at the chat and I see everybody typing, let's go, what am I going to do? Like, oh, let's go. I don't know what I'm talking about, but right. You're going to get that attention back. Same thing in person. If everybody starts raising their hand, what is the disengaged? Right now, you suddenly got them back. So those transitions can really, really help, and they can be super short. You don't have to spend 25 minutes on a transition, right? Because it's such an elaborate transition. But those transitions are everything, especially when you're talking about bringing that digital education into your classroom. So we kind of already talked about this, and that's building those healthy student relationships. And I always talk about it early because I'm very, very passionate about cultural relevant teaching and equity and building those healthy student relationships. And I do like to say healthy student relationships because sometimes teachers build relationships with students that are not healthy, right? So that's why I like to be very specific in building those healthy student relationships. But especially when we're talking about using technology more and more and more, because that's one of the complaints that I get from teachers is they start to feel disconnected from the student, right? They start to feel like the computer screen is between them and the student. Even if they're using the computers in classroom in person, they still start to feel that disconnect. And that's a real thing. So when that starts to happen, that's when you need to start thinking, well, how can I bring those connections back? One of the biggest things you can do is to use your students' names. And it may sound so trivial and it may sound so like, well, who can use your students' names, say their names. When people hear their names, it does something to them. Even if you're like, I hate life, it still does something to you to hear your name and to hear your name pronounced correctly, right? It does something to you. It validates you. And it also shows me that my teacher actually knows who I am. My teacher actually knows my name. Doing the little things like when the students are coming into the classroom, how you will greet them, you'll be at the door. But you're going to do the same thing if you're virtual. You're going to do the same thing if you're using technology in a hybrid way. If you're having an online meeting, whether it be like an A day, B day, the A day is the computer day, you're still going to greet them when they come in. You're still going to say their names, right? One of the big things that I started doing that made a difference, and it's such small stuff, right? Is when they came into the virtual class, I didn't have my PowerPoint up. We saw each other if they were on camera, or at least they saw me if they weren't on camera. But we saw each other before I pulled up the slideshow, right? I want you to know that we're still a community. I want you to come in and see people, come in and greet people before we go ahead and start getting to work. So just those like little things can help with building those relationships, even if you do have a computer screen, between you. SEL check-ins. I know most of us, and we're about to get to the lesson plan, and then I'll shut it down so we can take questions and discussion. Many of us have something that we do right at the beginning when students come in. Like I know it's called like a bell work or a bell ringer or a do now. Take some of those that you do for content and make them SEL check-ins. It's not something that you have to add on, right? But it's something that you can replace. So maybe not even every day. If you're like, baby, I need that time to go through homework or to go, that's fine. Tuesday and Thursday, it'll be an SEL check-in. It'll say, hey, how are you doing as a person, right? You will be amazed how something so simple, that's just open-ended question, how your students will start opening up to you, right? And when you talk about, just a little side, when you talk about building those healthy student relationships, One of the things that I tell my teachers is don't promise students what you can't give them. So I have teachers that'll say, you can tell me anything and it will stay between us. I can't promise you that. Because if you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, if you tell me you're going to hurt others, if you tell me you're being hurt, I'm going to report that. I'm not going to spread it around the school, but I'm going to make sure that you're safe. So that's one of those things that you can't promise students stuff that you can't give them. But you do want to say, on these SEL check-ins, go ahead and tell me how you're really feeling. But if it's something that I need to step in on, I am. Last but not least, routines. So, of course, when we're talking about classroom management, we're also going to continue to talk about classroom management when it deals with digital education. We can't lose that classroom management part of it. So when we're talking about routines and procedures, we have to continue those. Those do not go away. Where I don't care if you're teaching completely virtually, those do not go away. You still have to have those routines. Students crave structure. I don't care if they, tell you off and say, you're the only one that does this. Students crave structure. So we have to continuously give them structure, whether we're using, digital education or not. We have to continue to give them those routines and those structures. While your teaching has to change when you're talking about bringing in, digital spaces, the routines and the procedures do not. They grow and they modify, but they still need to be in place. So the last thing I want to look at before I give you the tech tool that I want to give you, and then I'm just going to go through that very quickly so you can see the different resources that you have, is these are the 5 conditions, and this is actually on the website that I'm going to give you. So we talked about don't use every tech tool, use the WHO system, have clear expectations for your students, put that rigor back into your lesson, make sure that your lesson is connected to your students' lives and building those healthy student relationships. And all of that is dealing with when you're bringing the digital education into your lessons. And then if it doesn't work, stop it, try again. If the tech tool doesn't work, try something else. Stop being so hard on yourself as well. Organize yourself and your students virtually and in person. Get good at creating and finding videos and allow your students to create videos as well. Use those transitions, effectively, and create and stick to routines. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about with our last couple of minutes is lesson planning. So, and I don't mean like whatever kind of lesson plan, if you even do lesson plans, whatever kind of lesson plan, because everywhere is different with what a lesson plan truly is. But I'm really talking about your 5-part distance learning, hybrid learning, really in-person learning lesson. So these are the 5 things that every single lesson should have. Every single lesson should have. What are we doing today, right? Your agenda and your bell ringer, something for them to do as soon as they get in that class. You need to keep them engaged, right? Because just because you teach from bell to bell doesn't mean that they're engaged. And I'm sure Stephanie went through that last time, and she's amazing. But just because your students are looking at the screen doesn't mean that they're engaged, right? Just because your students are compliant doesn't mean that they're engaged. So engagement is when they don't want to stop. They don't want to stop working. Can I please come back and finish this? No, go to your next class, right? That's engagement. So we want that bell ringer. We have some type of direct instruction, some type of student collaboration. So when I say collaboration, I don't necessarily mean collaborating with each other, but I do think that that is a really, really good idea. But collaborating with the content, okay? Some type of assessment. You should be assessing every single day. It could be a quick assessment, but I need to ask you some kind of open-ended question to see, did you get the content for today? We don't have another day to waste, right? So if half of my students didn't get the content, I need to reteach the content the next day. That's it. And then some type of reflection. Now, sometimes I'll put assessing and reflecting together, but there you go. So what I want to do at this point because I have more of this on the website, is I want to give you the website. Did I put it in there? Yeah. So the website does have a password. And this is a website that I created for a different class that was directly on distance learning and using Google, but it has a bunch of resources on it. So I was like, I'm going to give it to them too. So I created it for actually a paid class. You have to like pay to get this resource. So I'm giving it to you. But again, it was a direct focus on distance learning and Google and that kind of thing. But there's so many resources that anybody can use, blended, hybrid. So I just want to show you the resource. So this is the resource. You're going to kind of ignore the top part of it because it's dealing with, like some of this is dealing with the class that I taught. But these are the 5 conditions and the 5 essential practices. You can actually click on that and download it. And they have some, like a nice way to get your students like SEL check-ins and that kind of thing. I'm not going to go through all this. I wish I could, but we don't want to do that. So some distance learning resources, some Google help, management tips. So we're talking about digital citizenship and blended learning. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. These are the videos about classroom management when you're bringing in that digital education space. Have some good stuff on here, y'all. Management and organizing. So this is the 5-part lesson plan, and all of these things are hyperlinked. So if you are hybrid or if you are blended, these are some amazing videos showing you how to think a little bit differently. Like instead of thinking of your lesson plan, vertically, thinking about it. Am I saying that right? Vertically. Don't judge me. Thinking about it in a different way. We're still getting to everything, but not everyone needs to be working on the same thing at the same time. So really just mind-blowing, what you're doing in the classroom. Hybrid management help. Like there's some really good stuff on here, everybody. And then of course, tech tools. And what I did was I went through each part of the lesson plan and gave you tech tools to help you with each part of the lesson plan. So tech tools to help you with direct instruction, tech tools on your core content areas, student collaboration, different things you can do, assessments, like all the little assessments that you can do, and some reflecting. And notice we have some SEL check-in questions. And so it's a lot of awesome stuff. And I don't do a class on technology without talking about inclusion tools. I will say when you're talking about digital equity, you want to look at print friendly and PDF, because that will kind of allow you to almost save an entire website. Print friendly and awesome screenshot will allow you to save an entire website as a PDF. So if you're talking about printing off packets and things like that, if that's where we are right now, those two will help you kind of bring the digital space, even, if you have to use paper. So I suggest those two, and then some videos that I use and some different stuff. So you have a whole bunch of different tech tools that hopefully can help you out. Again, do not use all of these tech tools. Pick and choose what you want to kind of play with and practice with. So I'm going to stop there because I do want to make sure that we have our discussion time. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have some discussion.
Let me just, Dr. Desiree, thanks so much for that. Let me just put in our administrators right here. Okay, before we go into that, Dr. Desiree, let me just introduce first to you one of our administrators, Sir Angelo Malyag.
Hi.
Hello, Doc.
Okay, so it's like so much to digest, but yet our teachers are so delighted. As you can see, Dr. Desiree in the chat comments, we've been like discussing a lot of things in the comment section, giving our insights, and there's so many insights in the chat section right now. Okay, but maybe we can get some insights or reactions first from our administrators. Okay, based on the discussion. Okay, first off, I'd like to begin. And this is the one of the things that I always also preach to the teachers in the Philippines when it comes to technology integration. Go for quality, not for quantity. And I like that how Dr. Desiree emphasized that earlier on. It's not a matter of like I have 20 tools or 30 tools that I know. It's a matter of how much you can use it, how well you can use it. Okay, so if, for example, and I think that the Teacher Pau can actually relate to this because now Teacher Pau, Dr. Desiree is actually an administrator for a long time and she's going back to teaching and she's been having a hard time creating her ODL playlist or of the tools that she wants to use. And I think, Teacher Pau, Dr. Desiree already now gave you, the perfect way to prepare your ODL. That's the best thing. That's one of the really the highlight for me in the discussion. Okay, how about the other admins? Any insights, ideas, or maybe questions to Dr. Desiree?
I'll go next, Sir Franco.
Go ahead, Sir Jami.
I was waiting for confirmation. Anyway, yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Desiree, for your presentation. Dear co-admins, what I like about the presentation of Dr. Desiree is um, uh, she was actually showing us with her presentation the things that she presented to us. So this is how you ought to be when you're teaching your students, etc. So I could just imagine if I was a student in her class, I'd also be very very um, engrossed with the whatever the teacher is teaching, because you actually also see in her that she's very energetic, very passionate about what she's doing. So my question is, Dr. Desiree, is uh, it's I suppose it's almost 3 a.m. there, right? So what do you take to to keep that much energy? I'd like in on it.
Yes,
Me too.
3:27. No, it's 3:27 your time. It's 2:27 a.m. my time. Um, I really like. I don't take anything. Like people have asked me, like, how much coffee do you drink? I actually don't drink any. I've never drank coffee a day in my life. I've never tasted it. But I was like, I can't imagine myself on coffee. I'll probably be like, eh. But I truly like this is my passion and this is my gift. And that's what I really tell people. Like this is like I could be sick and I'll come on and be like, ping, ping, ping. And then as soon as I'm off, I'm like, so I mean, this is what I do. This is my passion. So that's all I can really say about it. It is my gift. I can't draw, I can't sing, but I can do this.
Wow, and that's like one of the perfect gifts, perhaps. No, before I continue with our other co-admins, okay, let's pause for that while because we have a question ready from our audience, and this is from Teacher Bam Smith. This is on, and she asks, is digital education help can help our community in making education inclusive, innovative, and progressive?
Yes. So the answer to that is yes and no. If we want to be completely honest with it, right? So if we're talking about digital education, because digital education and computers do not take the place of educators, it depends on the heart of the educator on if it can make it inclusive, innovative, and progressive. Because it can be suppressive, right? If I'm giving a student an assignment and that student doesn't have the tools to do the assignment, and I still punish them for not doing the assignment, then no, that digital education did not make it inclusive, right? It actually excluded that student from doing the lesson and actually learning the content. So when we're talking about digital equity, which is one of my, we can again talk about that for a couple of days. But when we're talking about digital equity, it really depends on the intent of the person behind the digital education. So can it be inclusive, innovative, and progressive? Absolutely, but it depends on the intent of the person who's using it. And when I say intent, I also just want to give this little note of intent does not completely intent is different from impact. So just because you intend something doesn't mean that that's how it's going to impact the student. So keep that in mind, that you can say, well, I didn't intend to hurt you, but you did. The impact was that you did. So the thing is, when we talk about intent, we also need to talk about impact.
Thank you. Thank you for that Dr. Desiree. And I guess maybe we can always think about what we did before, no, in the Philippines, Dr. Desiree. We did here before we start the pandemic, in order before we entered into the digital education and this online distance learning, we sort of like did like a survey or like needs assessments form, okay, for our students to know what devices they have, what access they have, what kind of internet they do, they have access to, so that we can really prepare what kind of modality we're going to engage in. That's why I told you earlier that some of our students here are under ODL or online distance learning. Some are in hybrid, okay, and some are in modular or printed modules because they don't have access to internet connection. But thank you so much for that, okay. Anyway, let's now proceed to Teacher Pao. Teacher Pao, insights, questions to Dr. Desiree.
All right. First and foremost, Dr. Desiree, thank you so much for sharing. Again, it's as if I am in a college class where the topic is actually on how to make sure that that what you do inside your class is something that's going to be successful, no, in terms of technology. Right now, that's always the challenge of our teachers right now. But with your presentation, you focused on what we can do and not on what we don't have. Okay? Because you've had points regarding student engagement where you focused on transitions, getting to know where your students at. I think you don't have to be in this digital age. I just think it was heightened, but you don't have to be in this digital age to actually focus on the students. And that's what I really love about your presentation right now. Um, my question, actually, I have a question regarding doing all of these things. How long? How long did it take you to actually adapt to the situation? Because if I remember it right, when you started your talk or your session this afternoon, you mentioned that school was shut overnight. How long were you able to work out a solution for the students and to arrive at a pace where you're already comfortable with it?
So when school was shut down overnight, I wasn't in the classroom. So let me just make that very, very clear. So one of the things when we do, like when I do a longer distance learning class, that I'll tell my teachers is I had years to perfect this, right? Like this stuff that I'm talking about, this was something I chose to do, which is different from being thrown into it. So, I like to be very honest, and I'm like, hold on, let me make it clear that I was never in your situation because I wasn't thrown into it. I chose to teach virtually. I chose to teach hybrid. So it's a little bit different from when it's like, oh, by the way, you're going to be doing this, right? So make that very, very clear. And none of this, like this is from years and years of testing stuff out. Like I said, I learned to organize myself because I would leave stuff in other rooms and the students would just completely disengage, right? Like I had to learn that, like I can't be off camera because they have to see my face apparently, or they'll just start doing other stuff. So I mean that stuff I had to learn. Even in the physical classroom, my first year of teaching, I had to learn classroom management. It wasn't something that I just wing in and was like, I'm so awesome. I thought I was awesome until I got all of my stuff stolen and students were just like, wouldn't pay attention to me. And, I thought I was awesome until it just wasn't working. And then I realized I had to change it. So that's my answer for that. It takes time. And that's why I tell my teachers, stop being so hard on yourself, because this is a whole new way of teaching for a lot of us. So it is almost like starting at day one. I've had like 20, 25 year veteran teachers that would say, I feel like this is my first day teaching again because I'm learning how to do this all over again. And I said, you are learning how to do it all over again. So that is an accurate assessment. So just like you were, up all night getting stuff done as a new teacher, you're going to be doing that again. And the difference now is that you have that experience. So don't be that hard on yourself because it's going to take time. It takes time to perfect it, just like it took time to perfect it when we were in person teaching without any technology. It's going to take time to perfect this. And as soon as we get it perfected, we're going to have to change again. And that's the beauty of education.
Thanks so much, Dr. Lester, for that. And definitely it takes time. And we can really see it how well you've answered, how well you've discussed your topic for today. Sir Jello, before we go to you, let's have another question from the audience. This is from teacher Ray Rival. Okay. Teacher Ray asks, I have a question. I agree with we should rethink assessments. Can you share examples of short and frequent assessments that you use in class?
Yes. So on the website, it has some tech tools under assessments, but some of my favorites that I use in class, I like to use, I guess people now call them exit tickets and that kind of stuff, but I didn't put formal names to everything, but I like to do quick assessments where it's either asking them more of an open-ended question to see did they actually understand what I taught. That's kind of where I didn't want a multiple choice. I didn't want something they can cheat on. I didn't want something that they can ask somebody else like, what did you put? And then put the same thing, right? Because if I just ask them, like I taught English. So if I ask them, find the noun, well, you could just ask them, like, what did you put? And then just write it. And I don't know if you really understood that. I don't know if you really got that, right? So just asking them more of an open-ended questions where you can kind of dig into, did they actually understand what we taught today? And sometimes I did like the SEL check-in, like, how did you feel about what we taught them? But if I'm really trying to see that they actually understand it, that is a very small assessment. And you can do that using technology, like using, there's a template that has like little post-its that the students can just take a post-it and, type that on, or do physical post-its. I should have owned stock in index cards. I used so much index cards. I was like, just take an index card and tell me blah, 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 blah. Write your name on the back. And I was just able, and that was something quick. Because like I would tell my students, even when we were doing like choice boards and things like that for assessments, and that's another kind of quick assessment. You can actually do a choice board and have them choose how to show you how they what they learned. And when you do a choice board for quick assessments, because of course you can do a choice board for projects and stuff like that, but when you do a choice board for quick assessments, the cool thing about that is you can make one choice board for the whole year for quick assessments, because these are just the quick assessments that they can choose to show you did they get the content. But when they would do that, that's something quick that I could just look through and go, wait, who wrote this? Right? Like they did not understand anything I just said, and I can, kind of go on that tomorrow. Like, let me rephrase what I said yesterday, blah, 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 blah. Cause they just didn't get it. Right. So those are, some examples of just short, open-ended questions to see, did they actually understand what you taught that day? And sometimes they'll be very frank with you and be like, I didn't get it. And you're like, all right, cool.
But maybe Dr. Desiree, maybe the question here by Teacher Ray, well, what we talked about earlier, the doctors, and I'm assuming that's something to do with formative assessments, okay? Something that we do in order in classroom to form our students, okay? But I think also, Teacher Ray, we also have to understand what Dr. Desiree mentioned earlier. When we rethink assessments, okay, we're also rethinking in a way that it should be promoting rigor. So what Dr. Desiree said is what we do in the classroom just to support them. This is supporting student learning. But if you want, for example, maybe Dr. Desiree, one of the things that Teacher Ray is concerned about is what if about graded assessments or summative assessments. Okay? So that's where Dr. Desiree's point on rigor comes in. Put the rigor on the assessments. That's how you rethink about it. You can't give, like, for example, graded assessments that talks about like recall or remembering concepts. That's going to like not really gonna measure the deep learning. So let's go for rigor that Dr. Desiree mentioned earlier. So let's
Right.
now proceed
And
to
there's still a place for ABC. There's still a place for multiple choice tests. Like, everything can't be this grand assessment if we're talking about real
yeah.
life, right? Let's be real. There's a place for the ABC test and things like that, but that can't be everything.
Thank you, Dr. Desiree. Let's now, Sir Jello, go ahead.
Hey. Again, good morning, Dr. Desiree. Okay. What I like about the talk, your talk, Doc, is that one, you have reminded us of the importance of relationship before even even having or to think about the content. It is more of how you'll be able to relate, because once the relationship is not there, it's over. Whatever you were telling, there will never be a connection to that. And then also for reminding us the importance of thinking, meaningful and purposeful integration of technology. It's not a matter of how many, but how impactful these technologies will be in our teaching. But I want to focus on one of the things that related to Miss Pau's question in adapting the situation. Now that we are at least, okay, in a way we have a grasp already of what is happening and what we can do. There is sometimes I feel that there's sometimes a temptation for many of us, as you mentioned, do not be hard on ourselves, but there's a temptation for us to, we already get through this, so these are the things that we have to really do and really improve on. How much important is putting into um, the importance of failure in uh, giving clear guidance or in protocols, because I think you mentioned also the importance of giving protocols, guidelines to our students. But now I'm shifting it to our teachers and to some of the administrators, maybe, because there is that temptation that we already done with a school year of distance learning, or we already have done distance ODL or any kind of way of teaching in this particular pandemic. Now we are trying to stabilize, but I feel that there's always still that temptation that it should not be perfect. So how important is that the teachers still be given that particular opportunity to fail?
That is beautiful. It kind of leads to like the having the growth mindset, right? Having that permission to fail. The thing that I tell, because I do teach, specifically educational leaders, and the thing that I tell my leaders is you can strive for perfection, you can, demand perfection. Failure is always going to be there. So it's one of those things where you can accept it and learn from it and have that growth mindset, or you can just be mad every day because failure is going to be there, right? Just because you say, I don't want failure, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So it's one of those things where we have to, like you said, like rethink failure, because failure is how we learn. If we don't fail, we don't learn. And that's what I mean by, when I say the struggle, students need to fail, teachers need to, that's how we learn. We learn when we do stuff incorrectly. So is one of those kind of really, it baffles me sometimes when our leaders don't get that, because failure is still going to be there. So it's like you're just making it harder on yourself, and you're just making it harder on your teachers by not having that growth mindset and that growth culture where if you fail, okay, let's look at it and let's look at how to be better. Because it didn't work. So, okay, we tried it, right? I just had a meeting with a group and we were talking about doing something. And we were going back and forth, like, oh, will it be successful? Will it not be successful? And finally I was like, we just got to try it. Like, eventually you got to stop talking about it and just try it. And if it fails, it fails. and you move on. Like eventually you have to try it. But one of the things that I tell my administrators and tell my teachers is it's going to make it much less scary if you're honest about it. And what I mean by that is when I try stuff in the classroom, I was like, hey, kiddos, I don't know how this is gonna work, but we're gonna try it, right? So then if it failed, I wasn't like, oh my goodness, oh, I'm gonna have to try to play this off. I was like, yeah, that sucked, y'all. Let's move on, right? Like I was just like, that did not work. Let's move on. Because I mean, but it's being honest about it. And same thing with administration. Like, y'all, we're gonna try this in our school, and we're gonna see if it works. If it doesn't, we're gonna revise it and keep trucking, right? But then when you do that, then you are giving your teachers permission to fail. And when you're doing it in the classroom, you're giving your students permission to fail because your students are seeing you fail and bounce back. And they're seeing you fail and revise. And they're going to start learning how to do that. So, and I just personally, I remember, I'll never forget, I put together a poetry unit. And when I say put together, I mean, I spent weeks putting together this poetry unit. And it was amazing. And the students made poetry folders and we decorated it. And we got into the first lesson. And it was the most boring thing I had ever taught in my life. Like I was boring myself. The students were bored. And I just, like, I stopped and was like, this just isn't working, right, y'all? They're like, no. And we just moved on. Like, we were like, okay, this isn't, we're going to move on from this unit. Like, we just kind of scrapped the whole thing. And it taught me so much as a teacher, but it also taught my students that not everything you do is going to be awesome and work, but you bounce back and you move on. So I think I completely agree with you. And we have to continue that culture. Because if we don't, we're still going to fail. So you can either embrace it or you can just, like I said, be mad every day.
That deserves like a round of virtual applause, teachers. Come on. Come on. What I'm going to do actually, no, what I'm going to do, I'm going to extract this particular segment of the session. I'm going to repost this all together because this is a gold message. No, this is a message coming from Dr. Desiree, something that all teachers, administrators should actually listen to because that's something that we are lacking here right now. And anyway, Dr. Desiree, let's have like two more questions, one from the audience. I'll also have one question from my end. Okay. This is from teacher Angelina. This is actually what I told you earlier before we started our session. Okay. Glad that we have a question from teacher Angie. And teacher Angie says, with regards to the challenge of accessibility to technology, which is a similar problem in the Philippines, how were you able to supplement learning in this scenario?
So it's not easy, right? None of this, I would say if it was easy, everybody would do it. So it's not an easy thing to supplement learning when you're trying to bring in digital education and you don't have the access. So that's when we start getting creative. That's when we start doing some research into what are some things that we can do offline? What are some things that we can do to like you said, to supplement. So one of the things is depending on what products you're using, but I can speak to at least Google. There's an offline setting to Google in Google Drive that you can turn on where the students can at least get to Google products, even if they don't have the internet. All they need to do is have a device. So if they have a device but they don't have the internet, at least they can still do the work. They can't turn it in and stuff like that, but at least they can still do the work. And then when they hit Wi-Fi again, it will bounce in. For my hybrid teachers, one of the things I suggest is having the last 2 or 3 minutes of class be download time. So what that means is instead of me sending them the link to the website, I'm going to use something like Awesome Screenshot, where you can take, me as a teacher, can take an image or a PDF, but it's capturing the entire website or the entire story, right? And then I can save that as a PDF and upload that to the LMS instead of sending them the link to the website. And then if I do it that way, then if I'm hybrid, like the last couple of minutes of class, go ahead and download everything you're going to need when you go home. So that way, when you go home, you don't have to touch the internet at all, but you're still getting the content that I want you to get. And I'm giving you time to download it. So, you know, when you go home, you don't even have to worry about that. So it's just like little tricks like that, thinking about, the digital equity space and what can you do to help your student. Sometimes we just got to go back to paper, right? I mean, it's just something that we may have to do. So I may have to send home a packet. I may have to print something out for you to, finish that assignment. It's not optimal when we're talking about distance education, but we also have to be realistic, right? And do what we need to do to make sure that the student, because it's not about, it's not about us. It's about making sure that the students get what they need and the students learn. So no matter how much I want to not print out that sheet of paper, if I need to print out the sheet of paper to make sure that student is successful, then that's what I'm going to do. So it's just making sure, it's just doing some research. What can students do offline versus having to have Wi-Fi for, and just making those little changes. Instead of sending them the link to the video to watch the video, send them the actual video so they can download the video and watch it offline. This is, and that's if I feel comfortable giving them the video. So there's always devil's advocate, to everything that you, but it's those little things that can honestly make a difference. And like I tell my teachers here in the States, even if you're completely virtual, doing some of those little things where if my student needs to go to the library, they don't have to sit there for 3 hours reading the website and watching the video. They can download them and go home. So even if they are completely virtual, at least they're there for 5 minutes downloading everything versus being there for their whole night. So it's just like those kind of little things.
Thank you, Dr. Desiree, for that answer. Again, going back to our students, no, to our students concerned. Now, my question maybe the last question for today is I'd like to ask about onboarding, Dr. Desiree, because digital education is not something that everyone's actually would buy or would actually get into, and we know that there are definitely some hard students, teachers, or parents that are not actually into the concept of digital education or learning. So how do you very quickly, because I know this demands like a whole discussion altogether, but very briefly, how do we like get on board students, okay, get teachers on board as well into digital education, especially those that are not really our teachers that are not like into tech, using technology integration, and of course our parents as well, because you mentioned earlier that we need to build like a parent school parent teacher collaboration in order for this to work. So how do we get into that?
I think one of the things that we need to rethink is how do we, like you said, how do we get people on board for anything? And most of that is going to be exposure. So if we slowly, sometimes with some of our teachers, if we get them to use it, they'll be more comfortable having their students use it. So I learned technology because I went to a school where everything was through email. We didn't have any announcements. We didn't have it, like everything, literally you had to check your email to tell it to the students. And that's when I got into technology because I was forced to. So it's one of those things where if we have our teachers use it, like administrator, build a Google Classroom, and that's where your teachers turn in their lesson plans. Like, like you have to start making them use it, and then they're going to be like, oh, okay. Like not at the beginning. It's not going to be like, oh, it's awesome. No, they're going to struggle. They're going to hate you, but make them use it, and then they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable having the students use it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Desiree, for that very brief but very meaningful answer. Okay, so now, Dr. Desiree, that will now conclude our session. But before we let you go and before we say our goodbye and thanks, okay, we'd like to present first our as a form of appreciation. I know we can't repay you in any form, but at least just receive this certificate of appreciation, which will be read by our my co-administrator, Teacher Pau.
Of course, it's my pleasure to present this certificate of appreciation for what she has shared today, for what she has reminded about. So the certificate of appreciation is respectfully awarded to Dr. Desiree Alexander for sharing her knowledge and expertise in the recently concluded webinar entitled Digital Education: What It Means for Teachers and Students, awarded on July 17, 2021, to be signed by the administrators of Kaagapay Teacher Support, Sir Jambi, myself, Sir Jello, and Sir Franco Adun. Thank you so much, Miss Desiree, for sharing with us tons of information. But I'm sure, even if a lot of teachers are team live, they will definitely be team replay as well. I will definitely go back to this one. Yes, and take
Me
down notes again, just for
me
me to be
too.
reminded of what you have shared. Thank you so much,
And
Miss
again,
Desiree.
I'm really going to do that. I'm going to capture that segment about failure. I'm going to produce that into another video. Anyway, Dr. Desiree, may we just simply ask like a final message to our Filipino teachers here in the Philippines, on words of encouragement or hope to all teachers here in the Philippines.
I would just definitely say you are doing better than you think you're doing. We are harder on ourselves than we are on others. So the same encouragement that you give to other teachers, the same encouragement that you give to your students, I want you to also turn that back on yourself and give it to yourself, because you are rock stars and not everyone can do what you do. You are professionals, and just give yourself some grace. I know people say it's kind of like the saying now, but honestly, give yourself some grace, give yourself a pat on the back, and eat a cookie, because you are awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Desiree. And with that, teachers, we conclude our session with Dr. Desiree. And again, let's say all our thanks via the chat, just to send appreciation to Dr. Desiree. Again, teacher Dr. Desiree, will now be goodbye to you. Again, thank you so much for being with us and accommodating our simple request of sharing your expertise to our community.
Anytime.
In the
Thank y'all.
Philippines, we'd like to say maraming salamat. Mabuhay ka, Dr. Desiree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, no,
next
okay,
we
our
have
next
Teacher
speaker
Pao.
is, of course, no, teachers,
How do you follow that?
we
Paano
can't,
mo
no,
nga
it's hard.
susundan?
Yes,
'Di ba? Paano mo
intense
susundan?
what I really like is sobrang grabe yung short no, by the sorry, ano natin by the way yung bago tayo magkwentuhan 'no, teachers, i-ano mo natin yung, evaluation link sa mga teachers natin so you could start evaluating while we are, digesting that very awesome presentation by Dr. Desiree and also give some more insights about it. But, here it is, teachers. Don't forget um, to um, to check on the link first if it works. Okay, alam naman natin minsan ngayon mga panahon ito ay nahihilo-hilo na si si Sir Franco at minsan nagkakamali-mali na sa mga evaluation link. Anyway, yun. Okay, so again, don't forget teachers, your certificates will be delivered in 5 to 7 days via email. I have we've just done sending your certificates from session 1 and session 2. So sana po nakuha nyo na yun via email. Kung hindi po, send us an email. Okay? So this one is also going to be in 5 to 7 days. And going back, admins, how was it? Napakaganda nung tanong ni Sir Jello kanina. Although may idea naman tayo dun, pero iba lang na nanggaling kay Dr. Desiree. Kaya ang ganda na
Correct.
na-surface ni Sir Jello yung ano kanina about that ano. Kasi Sir Jambi, no, if you still remember, napag-usapan natin yan before yung tinatawag nating fail forward when
Yes.
we had Stephanie Rothstein and Bonnie Shilep here at Kaagapay Teacher Support. Okay? So, pero sobrang nasagot niya. No? Pero totoo, pag may karoon ako ng time, i-extract ko talaga yung part na yun.
So never mo
Di
na
ba?
ay, hindi alam ko na kailan. Sa ano, sa 20. Sa
Oh,
20,
sa 20. Ay, sa
nakakaliw sa
20,
20.
may dentist appointment ako. Eh.
Talagang may
'Di,
schedule.
may schedule pa rin. 'Di pero again 'no, teachers, maraming salamat for being with us here. Pero sa totoo lang talaga, ito naman kasi talagang digital education, ginagawa naman talaga natin. Kaya lahat naman tayo
Correct,
ngayon,
correct.
kahit lalo na ngayon, I think that's the one of the best things that the pandemic ano 'no, brought us. It forces us to realize that education should be within this ano na, within this reality of the digital education. Medyo ano lang 'no, na pinadali or it was hastened by the pandemic on embracing digital education. Pero yun nga, sabi pa rin Dr. Desiree kanina, which I agree, no? Take it slow, teachers. Huwag tayong magmadali. Don't be too hard on yourselves. Kung meron kayo hindi alam na tools, hindi kayo makasabay, something like that, no? Huwag tayong like panghinaan ng loob na, ay, hindi naman ako magaling sa tech tools. Teachers, to lang, wala namang pinanganak na magaling sa tech tools. Except yung mga estudyante natin maybe kasi mga digital native sila. Pero even so, no? We're mostly on the same page pa rin naman. Kaya lang talaga nagkakaiba-iba sa siguro sa commitment, no? Talaga may mga teachers na sobrang committed. Yes. Ikaw ba, teacher pa? Committed ka ba? Yan.
Yeah.
Siyempre, maisingit natin yun,
Committed
ano?
po
Ang
tayo
haba ng intro ko
in
para,
ano,
ang
committed po
haba ng
tayo
intro
sa
ko para isingit lang
goal.
yun, ano?
Naipasok mo talaga yun.
Siyempre. By the way, no,
Committed tayo sa
congratulations, Teacher Pao. Teachers,
diploma.
i-congratulate natin si Teacher Pao kasi she's uh, she's into a relationship now. Ay, ano, she's fully vaccinated. She's fully vaccinated na po, teacher. So, congratulations, Teacher Pao. Kami po mag-iintay. Ako bukas, kami ng wife ko, bukas po kami. Yung mag-aano po kami.
Wow.
By the way, invite ko lang kay teachers, no? Unang-una, please do visit Sir Jambi's page, okay? Para maka-experience po tayo ng live music at mga
Wala
ano
bang
mga
sample dyan daw? Baka
mga
may pa-sample
inspirational.
daw.
Nako, Sir Jello, wag
Wag baka
bawal.
baka
Okay?
kasi maano ito, eh, ma-demonetize.
Hindi, pero bawal. Kasi bakit? Punta tayo dun sa page kasi
Oo
dun
nga,
talaga natin
tama, tama.
dapat mag-subscribe, mag-follow tayo sa page, i-like natin yung page ni Sir Jambi. Let's go with Sir Jambi, that's Jambi Santos.
Joseph,
This is
Joseph
okay. Or
Santos.
can you please link the page on our chat right now? We still have like viewers right now. Okay? And of course, don't forget to also subscribe to Sir Jello's Connected with Sir Jello. YouTube channel. And of course, teachers, huwag natin kakalimutan, hanapin na rin natin sa TikTok si Teacher Pao. Okay? So
Yun,
teachers,
no?
Yun.
kanya-kanya kami ng mga channels, no? Meron kami YouTube, meron kami TikTok. We're all over the place. So please look for us and support our endeavors, no? In whatever way we can. Okay? At may makikita po kayo diyang mga value at essence. Okay? So teachers, that's going to be it for today. Maraming salamat. Admins, meron pa ba tayong message sa kanila or anything? Reminders? Okay, wala naman na. Okay, teachers. Also, by the way,
Wala.
wag natin kakalimutan, teachers.
Basahin mo,
We're going to have
lang yung
still.
ano ko, basahin mo na lang yung message ko sa ano sa KTS GC natin.
Okay, yan.
Ayun.
Ilalagay ko na,
Yun,
teachers.
no?
I'll put it in the chat now. This is Sir Jambi's webpage, Facebook page, no? Please do follow, no? At madami kayong makukuha. Pag, sometimes pagod lang tayo, you'll see a lot of songs here. I like the last song, okay? Paborito kayo nung high school. Nung 90s,
Wow.
batang 90s talaga ako, yes. Pero di ko siya kinakanta kasi nakakasira ng araw pag kinakanta ko siya. Anyway, maraming salamat, teachers. Teacher, may I just invite you on the last 4 sessions of our July series. Our 5th session we'll be talking about Google Jamboard, okay, a complete walkthrough. And on the 6th session on next Saturday, we'll be talking about the management of the digital classroom. And on the 7th session, we'll be talking about Google Chrome. And we'll be ending our July series with a workshop on video editing and video creation or video lesson creations. Okay? So maraming salamat, teachers. And again, congratulations sa mga nakatapos na ng virtual graduations nila. Palakpakan po tayo sa inyong lahat, sa mga sakripisyo nyo. And sa mga gumagawa po, good luck, teachers. Okay? Pagkatapos po niya, magpahinga po tayo. Again, maraming salamat, teachers, and have a great day. Good afternoon po.
Happy weekend.
Weekend.
Weekend.